They arrived with the arrogance of gods, descending from the stars to claim a fragile blue world. They expected panic. They expected primitive weapons and mass surrender. But the alien armada didn't understand the fatal truth. They hadn't found a flock of sheep. They had cornered a sleeping leviathan. The warning did not come from a frantic civilian telescope, nor did it manifest as a cinematic shadow falling over a major city. It arrived as a cold, hard string of anomalous data at the Space Force Operations Center in Colorado Springs. At exactly 0400 hours, standard military time, the James Webb Space Telescope's deep field sensors registered a localized distortion in the cosmic microwave background near the orbit of Jupiter. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the lead civilian astrophysicist contracted under the Department of Defense, was the first to realize the implication of the data. She sat in the sterile, neon-lit hum of the command bunker, her eyes tracking the telemetry scrolling across her monitors. "Commander," Dr. Reed said, her voice completely devoid of the panic one might expect from the harbinger of the apocalypse. "We have a spatial breach. It's not a comet. It's not a stray asteroid cluster. The mass energy readings are synthetic." Commander Nathan Cross leaned over her console. A veteran of the newly integrated orbital defense initiatives, Cross was a man who operated entirely on logic and contingency plans. He stared at the thermal blooming on the screen. "Velocity? Decelerating from superluminal speeds," Reed replied, her fingers dancing across the mechanical keyboard. "They are utilizing some form of Alcubierre warp dynamic, but it's remarkably inefficient. They're bleeding exotic matter all over the Jovian gravity well." "But, Commander, there are over 400 distinct vessels." Cross didn't flinch. He reached for the red handset that connected directly to the Pentagon's subterranean crisis network. "Initiate Protocol Icarus. Wake the President. And get me the liaisons from Lockheed Martin and SpaceX. If this is a first contact scenario, we need the orbital defense grid primed, and we need the Skunkworks Black projects off the leash." Within 24 hours, the alien armada was in high Earth orbit. To the naked eye, it was a terrifying spectacle. 400 massive cruisers, built of a dark, jagged alloy that swallowed the sunlight, hung ominously over Earth's major population centers. They were the Kalan Concord, an expansionist empire that had spent the last 10,000 years subjugating primitive worlds across the Orion Spur. Aboard the flagship, the Vanguard of Truth, Supreme Fleetmaster Velok stared down at the blue and green sphere. His reptilian eyes narrowed with predatory satisfaction. The planetary scans had come back exactly as expected, a type, zero civilization on the Kardashev scale. They utilized primitive chemical rockets, burned fossil fuels, and possessed a fractured, divided global government. Their energy output was laughably low. They were barely clinging to their own atmosphere. "Fleetmaster," his tactical officer hissed, bowing deeply. "The native communication networks are chaotic. They are broadcasting millions of unencrypted signals. They call themselves humans. Shall we initiate the pacification broadcast?" "Proceed," Velok commanded, his scales rippling with amusement. "Override their primitive satellite networks. Let them see the face of their new masters." Down on Earth, every television screen, every smartphone, every Times Square billboard, and every air traffic control monitor suddenly static washed into darkness. A moment later, the visage of Fleetmaster Velok appeared. His alien features were sharp, intimidating, and cold. A synthesized translation echoed from the speakers of 8 billion devices simultaneously. "Inhabitants of Earth, we are the Kalan Concord. We bring order to the untamed stars. Your world has been evaluated and found lacking. Do not attempt to resist. Your primitive kinetic weapons are useless against our shielding. Surrender your governments, power down your military installations, and submit to the Concord, and you shall be integrated as a labor-class species. You have exactly one planetary rotation to comply. Any resistance will be met with orbital annihilation." The broadcast ended. The screens returned to normal. Velok sat back in his command throne, waiting for the inevitable chaos. On every other world they had conquered, this was the moment the natives turned on themselves. Cities would burn, religious cults would riot, and militaries would launch their pathetic nuclear missiles only to watch them detonate harmlessly against the Kalan deflector shields. But as the hours ticked by, Velok's tactical officer began to look confused. "Fleetmaster," the officer murmured, his claws tapping against the holographic console. The humans, they are not rioting. Explain, Velok growled. Their civilian populations are retreating to subterranean shelters with alarming efficiency, and their militaries, they are not launching their nuclear stockpiles, they are simply waiting. Furthermore, their chaotic broadcast networks have gone completely silent. Velok frowned. Silent? Have they capitulated? No, Fleet Master. They have switched to a unified, heavily encrypted transmission frequency. Our linguists cannot break it. The encryption relies on a quantum entanglement matrix that our computers do not recognize. Velok's arrogant smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. A Type 0 civilization should not possess quantum entanglement communication. Down in the Colorado Springs bunker, Commander Cross was looking at a global holographic map. The Earth was not in chaos. It was locking down. Humanity had spent the last 200 years inventing new and terrifying ways to destroy each other. The idea of an alien invasion wasn't a nightmare. To the military-industrial complex, it was the ultimate unifying contingency. Lockheed confirms the HFY-7 orbital radar systems have full locks on all 400 alien vessels, reported Major William Bradley, the liaison to the defense contractors. Palantir's AI prediction models have mapped their patrol routes, shield frequencies, and engine exhaust ports. They're venting heat like a 19th century steam engine, Commander. Their stealth tech is non-existent. Dr. Reed adjusted her glasses, looking at the thermal scans of the alien ships. Commander, their energy shields are designed to deflect high-yield kinetic impacts and low-tier plasma. They expect us to shoot ICBMs at them. Cross allowed a ghost of a smile to touch his lips. Why would we throw rocks at them, Doctor, when we've been sitting on the directed energy weapons DARPA developed a decade ago? Orders, Commander? Major Bradley asked. Let them fire the first shot, Cross said softly. The moment they violate our atmosphere with hostile intent, we drop the veil. The deadline expired. Aboard the Vanguard of Truth, Fleet Master Velok grew impatient with the eerie silence emanating from the blue planet. It was unnatural. There were no pleas for mercy, no panicked delegations, no desperation, just a cold, calculating stillness. They insult us with their silence, Velok spat, gripping the armrests of his command throne. Target a secondary population center, a military installation, if possible. Demonstrate our power. Let them burn. Targeting a peninsula in their northern hemisphere, the tactical officer replied. A naval installation known as Norfolk, firing primary plasma lance. A blinding beam of superheated plasma erupted from the belly of a Kalan dreadnought positioned over the Atlantic. It streaked down through the atmosphere, a spear of purple fire meant to vaporize concrete, steel, and flesh in a microsecond. But it never touched the ground. 10 miles above the eastern seaboard, the plasma beam hit an invisible barrier, the sky illuminated in a brilliant, terrifying lattice of hexagonal blue light. The energy of the alien weapon washed over the shield, dissipating harmlessly into the upper atmosphere, causing nothing more than a spectacular aurora borealis over the eastern United States. On the Kalan flagship, alarms began to scream. Report! Velok roared, standing up. Fleet Master! The kinetic lance was intercepted! The planet possesses a localized energy dispersion grid, but our sensors showed no such technology. Before Velok could process the impossibility of a primitive species possessing a planetary shield, the human retaliation began. It did not come from missile silos or fighter jets. It came from the shadows. Humanity, having survived the Cold War and the terrifying dawn of the artificial intelligence age, knew that brute force was for the weak. Real warfare was fought in the mind, in the code, and in the unseen spectrums. At the United States Cyber Command, operators working in tandem with advanced, black-budget AI constructs unleashed a localized cyber assault. They didn't just hack the Kalan ships, they dissected them. The alien computer systems, having never faced an adversary that used polymorphic, self-replicating digital viruses, were torn apart in seconds. Sir, their targeting firewalls are down, Major Bradley announced in the Colorado Springs bunker. Palantir's AI just convinced their life support systems that they are running at optimal capacity while subtly dropping their oxygen mix by 3%. They won't die, but they'll get sluggish. Furthermore, SpaceX's orbital defense satellites are in position. SpaceX? Dr. Reed asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought those were just Starlink nodes for global internet. Cross glanced at her. The civilian sector thinks they are. In reality, every 50th satellite contains a tungsten rod kinetic bombardment payload, guided by quantum-locked lasers. And that's just the conventional stuff. Bradley, give the order to the Odin platform. High above the Earth, a cloaked satellite, a joint venture between Boeing and the Department of Defense that had officially been canceled 20 years prior, dropped its stealth configuration. It didn't fire a missile. It fired a concentrated beam of exotic particles, a directed energy weapon powered by a miniature fusion reactor. The beam struck the Kalan cruiser that had fired the plasma lance. The alien vessel's deflector shields, designed for standard plasma and physical impacts, offered zero resistance to a phase-shifted particle beam. The beam sliced cleanly through the center of the alien ship, severing its power core from its primary engines. The massive alien dreadnought went dark. It didn't explode. It simply died, drifting listlessly in Earth's orbit, a multi-million-ton coffin held captive by gravity. Aboard the Vanguard of Truth, sheer, unadulterated panic erupted. "Fleet Master!" the tactical officer shrieked, his claws flying over consoles that were rapidly filling with human error codes and mocking, scrolling text in a language they didn't understand. "Cruiser Bloodtide has been disabled. Complete loss of primary power. Furthermore, our weapon systems are offline. A digital contagion is rewriting our core targeting algorithms. Every time I try to purge it, it adapts." Velox stared out the viewport at the dead hulk of his cruiser. His heart pounded against his ribs. This was impossible. This was a type, zero world. They were apes playing with fire. How did they have phase particle weaponry? How did they have autonomous predatory code? "Reroute manual controls," Velox bellowed. "Launch the fighter swarms. Order the fleet to descend into the atmosphere and level their cities manually. If we cannot shoot from orbit, we will crush them on the ground." But as the Kalan hangar doors opened to release thousands of atmospheric fighter craft, the true horror of the human military-industrial complex was finally revealed. The oceans of Earth began to boil. From the depths of the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Arctic, massive silhouettes broke the surface. These were not the nuclear submarines known to the public. These were deep-pressure, supercavitation assault carriers, built in secret by a coalition of the world's leading aerospace and defense corporations under the darkest black budgets in human history. From these carriers launched a swarm of autonomous, hypersonic drones. They moved not like mechanical aircraft, but like a flock of predatory birds, guided by a localized hive mind AI. They broke the sound barrier instantly, tearing upward through the atmosphere to meet the descending alien fighters. The sky above Earth turned into a chaotic, terrifying meat grinder. But it wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The human drones were faster, smaller, and pulled gravitational maneuvers that would have turned an organic pilot into soup. They danced through the Kalan fighter formations, utilizing hyper-frequency sonic blasts and localized EMP bursts that short-circuited the alien engines. Kalan fighters dropped from the sky like dead insects, crashing into the oceans and uninhabited deserts, purposefully herded away from population centers by the human AI. "Commander," Major Bradley said, his voice carrying a note of quiet awe. "The alien fighter screen has been neutralized. Total engagement time, 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Human casualties, 0. Cross crossed his arms over his chest. "Let's remind them whose house they broke into. Connect me to the alien flagship. Audio only. Let's not give them the satisfaction of seeing us sweat." The bridge of the Vanguard of Truth smelled of ozone, burnt wiring, and the distinct pheromones of reptilian terror. Velox stood immobilized, his mind failing to grasp the tactical data. In less than an hour, his invincible armada had been humiliated. One cruiser was dead in space, their fighter screens were annihilated, and their ship's internal networks were fighting a losing war against a human digital entity that seemed to be playing with them. Suddenly, the bridge's main holographic projector flickered. The tactical data vanished, replaced by a single, steady audio waveform. A calm, deep voice echoed through the bridge, translated perfectly into the Kalan native tongue. "This is Commander Nathan Cross of the United Earth Defense Council. To the commander of the hostile fleet, your weapons are offline. Your navigation computers are locked. You are currently trapped in Earth's orbit. If you attempt to initiate your warp drives, our orbital railguns will shatter your engines, and you will burn up in our atmosphere. Stand down." Velox bared his fangs, his pride warring with his survival instinct. "You are primitives," he screamed at the audio waveform. "Our scans, our deep space telemetry. You burn fossil fuels. You use chemical rockets. You are a fragmented, warring species. A low, dry chuckle echoed from the speakers. It was a terrifying sound. You scanned our civilian sector, Fleet Master. Did you really think a species that survived 2 world wars, the splitting of the atom, and the dawn of artificial intelligence would leave its actual military capabilities sitting in plain sight for any passing telescope to see? Vailok froze. Civilian sector? We learned a long time ago that the universe is a dark forest, Cross continued, his voice devoid of malice, carrying only the cold, hard weight of a predator, explaining the rules of the jungle. We didn't know what was out there. So, we intentionally throttled our planetary energy signature. We kept burning oil and launching loud, slow rockets to make ourselves look harmless. Why broadcast our technological ascension when we could hide it? We've possessed zero-point energy and gravity manipulation for 50 years, Fleet Master. We kept it hidden, building our real fleet in the shadow of the moon, out of the line of sight of the galactic plane. Velok felt a cold dread pool in his stomach. A decoy planet. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a camouflage net. Who? Who are you? Velok whispered. We are humanity. And you just gave us the one thing we were missing. And what is that? A unified target. In the Colorado Springs bunker, Cross muted the microphone. He looked at Dr. Reed and Major Bradley. Are the captured drives secure? Dr. Reed nodded, her eyes wide with adrenaline. Yes, Commander. The boarding teams from the orbital drop pods have successfully secured the engine room of the disabled cruiser. We have their Alcubierre tech. Our engineers at Lockheed and DARPA are already reverse engineering the schematics. Commander, we always had the firepower, but we lacked efficient, faster-than-light travel. With their warp cores, we aren't just confined to the Sol system anymore, Cross finished, his eyes turning to the galactic map. We have the keys to the ocean. Back on the flagship, Velok watched in horror as the space behind Earth's moon began to shimmer. The optical camouflage that had cloaked the dark side of the moon for decades was dropped. From the shadow of the lunar surface emerged a fleet that made the Kalan Armada look like children's toys. They were not sleek. They were not beautiful. They were brutalist nightmares of human engineering, constructed from depleted uranium, advanced carbon nanotubes, and scavenged asteroid metal. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with railguns the size of skyscrapers and phase particle cannons that glowed with contained starfire. The lead human ship, the Archangel, eclipsed Velok's flagship in size by a factor of 3. It didn't just move through space. It seemed to command it, gravity bending around its massive hull as it glided into position, boxing in the Kalan fleet. Fleetmaster, the tactical officer, wept. They are locking onto every ship in our fleet. They aren't just aiming at us. They are calculating our warp trajectories. They are downloading our star charts. Velok collapsed into his command throne. The Kalan Concord had subjugated hundreds of worlds because they struck first, relying on overwhelming technological superiority. But they had grown complacent. They had never known total war. They had never faced a species that had evolved through constant, brutal, industrialized conflict. A species that had perfected the art of destruction before they even touched the stars. The humans hadn't just survived their violent history, they had weaponized it. The radio crackled again. Cross's voice returned, colder this time. Fleetmaster Velok, you have 30 seconds to transmit an unconditional surrender and transfer command codes for all remaining vessels to our AI network. If you refuse, we will not just destroy your fleet. We will use your star charts, we will find the Kalan Concord, and we will demonstrate what a real planetary siege looks like. Velok looked around his bridge. His crew was broken, terrified, completely defeated without a single human soldier having to fire a rifle. He looked at the massive, looming hull of the Archangel outside his viewport. With a trembling claw, he reached for the command console. We surrender, Velok whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Excellent, Cross replied. Welcome to Earth. The interrogation room, buried 70 stories beneath the Rocky Mountains, was not designed for comfort. It was a stark, brutally utilitarian cube of reinforced concrete, illuminated by the harsh, unforgiving glare of fluorescent halogens. There were no windows, no clocks, and no indications of the passage of time. For a being like Fleetmaster Velok, whose entire culture was built upon grandiose displays of architectural dominance and ornate visual intimidation, the sheer Sterile minimalism of the human bunker was psychologically suffocating. He sat shackled to a cold steel chair, his reptilian scales appearing dull and ashen under the artificial lighting, the heavy magnetic restraints humming quietly against his wrists. Commander Nathan Cross sat directly across from him. The human did not wear an elaborate military uniform adorned with medals, nor did he carry any ceremonial weapons. He wore a simple, unbranded black tactical sweater and dark trousers. To Velok, this lack of adornment was deeply unsettling. The human exuded a quiet, terrifying confidence, the aura of an apex predator that did not need to puff up its chest to prove its dominance. Your internal ship schematics were surprisingly easy to decipher, Cross began, his voice flat, devoid of anger or triumph. He tossed a thick, physical dossier onto the metal table. The primitive nature of paper shocked Velok. Our engineers at Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin have spent the last 48 hours dissecting the disabled cruiser. Dr. Robert Hughes, our chief propulsion contractor, was actually disappointed. He expected a marvel of engineering. Instead, he found a propulsion system that is remarkably primitive, attached to an Alcubierre warp drive that leaks lethal cosmic radiation into its own engineering bays. Your people possess faster-than-light capabilities, yet you power it with inefficient, heavy-element fusion reactors. Velok bared his jagged teeth, a low hiss escaping his throat. You mock the Kalen Concord, primate. You sit on a rock orbiting a yellow dwarf star, playing with stolen fire, while we have ruled the Orion Spur for 10 millennia. Ruled. Cross corrected smoothly, leaning forward. Past tense. Palantir's deep learning algorithms cracked your encrypted tactical databanks 3 hours ago, Fleetmaster. We translated your star charts, your military manifests, and more importantly, your internal fleet communications. We noticed a very curious discrepancy in your logistical data. Velok's eyes narrowed. His breathing grew shallow. Your artificial intelligences are abominations. They possess no soul, no honor. They possess efficiency, Cross countered, tapping the thick paper folder. And they noticed that your armada, 400 of your most heavily armed dreadnoughts, was not traveling with the logistical supply chains typical of an expansionist invasion force. You brought your civilian breeding castes. You brought your seed banks. You brought historical archives and cultural monuments packed into your cargo holds. This wasn't an invasion, Velok. This was a mass exodus. The silence in the room stretched until it felt heavier than gravity. Vielic stared at the metal table, the arrogant fire that had burned in his eyes during his initial broadcast completely extinguished. He looked suddenly old, broken, and impossibly tired. You weren't coming here to enslave us, Cross continued softly, his piercing gaze locking onto the alien. You were coming here to hide. You found a planet that looked primitive from afar, a rock that emitted low energy signatures, and you thought you could easily exterminate the indigenous wildlife and claim it as a fortress. You are running from something. Velok closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was a hollow rasp, stripped of all bravado. You humans think you are so clever. You think your hidden fleets and your zero-point energy make you gods. You know nothing of the true dark. The galaxy is not a battlefield, Commander. It is a slaughterhouse. Dr. Evelyn Reed stepped out from the shadows of the room's periphery, holding a sleek digital tablet. We recovered fragmented telemetry files from your flagship's deep space sensor arrays, she stated, her tone purely analytical. There are massive gravitational anomalies propagating across the galactic core, pushing outward toward the Orion Spur. Entire star systems are going dark. The energy signatures do not match any known stellar phenomena. What is it, Fleetmaster? Velok let out a sound that resembled a dry, hacking sob. We called them the Zeluxian Swarm. But they have no true name. They are a self-replicating biomechanical plague. They do not negotiate. They do not conquer. They consume. They strip planets of all biological matter and mineral wealth to build millions more of their vessels. They block out the stars. Our empire. Our glorious 10,000-year Concord. It was turned to ash in less than 5 standard cycles. We deployed our greatest weapons, our planetary defense grids, our plasma lances. They absorbed it all. The fleet sitting in your orbit is all that remains of my species. We came to this primitive edge of the galaxy hoping the swarm would ignore it. Cross absorbed the information without a flinch. The revelation that the universe contained a cosmic apex predator would have shattered the psyche of a lesser species. But humanity had spent its entire existence looking up at the dark sky with a healthy mix of wonder and extreme paranoia. This was exactly why the Black Projects existed. This was exactly why they had hidden their technological ascension. They are tracking your warp signatures, aren't they? Major William Bradley asked, stepping into the light beside Dr. Reed. His face was grim. Yes, Vaylock whispered. They hunt the subspace wakes left by our FTL drives. They are coming. By my calculations, they will arrive in your solar system within 18 of your Earth months. You have doomed yourselves by disabling our fleet. You should have let us take this world. At least, we would have died fighting on the surface. Cross stood up slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his sweater. He looked down at the defeated alien commander, not with pity, but with a cold, calculating determination that chilled Vaylock to his core. Fleetmaster, you made a fundamental miscalculation about human psychology, Cross said quietly. You thought we hid because we were weak. We hid because we knew we hadn't finished building our arsenal yet. You brought us faster-than-light drives. You brought us the blueprints of your enemies. You just gave the most militarized, stubborn, and violently inventive species in the universe the exact tools they need to break the food chain. Cross turned toward Dr. Reed. Doctor, contact the Joint Chiefs. Tell the executives at General Dynamics, Boeing, and Raytheon to clear their schedules indefinitely. We are lifting the veil entirely. I want the lunar shipyards, operating at 400% capacity. Integrate their Alcubierre technology into our zero-point reactor designs. We have 18 months to turn the Sol system into a meat grinder. As Cross walked toward the heavy steel door, Vaylock called out desperately, You cannot defeat them. They are a force of nature. They will extinguish your sun. Cross paused in the doorway, glancing back over his shoulder. We've survived our own nature for millennia, Vaylock. Let's see how they handle ours. 18 months later, the Sol system had fundamentally transformed. It was no longer a quiet, unassuming collection of planets orbiting a yellow star. Instead, it was a fortress of unfathomable lethality. The human military-industrial complex, unchained from the tedious need for secrecy and completely fueled by the existential threat of total annihilation, had achieved a century of technological advancement in less than 2 short years. The captured Kalan vessels had been stripped down to their quantum bolts and rigorously reverse-engineered. Their inefficient fusion drives were immediately discarded, replaced by human zero-point energy siphons that drew seemingly limitless power directly from the quantum vacuum of space. High above Earth, the orbital defense grid was no longer a collection of hidden satellites. It was a visible, shimmering halo of heavily armored battle stations. The Archangel, the massive dreadnought that had humbled the Kalan fleet, now proudly served as the flagship of the newly formed Terran Armada, leading a fleet of over 2,000 heavily modified, warp-capable warships. On the bustling bridge of the Archangel, Commander Nathan Cross stood with his hands firmly clasped behind his back, silently watching the tactical holograms project the outer edges of the solar system. Beside him stood Dr. Evelyn Reed and Major William Bradley, both looking resolute. In the back of the massive bridge, allowed to witness the glorious culmination of human defiance, stood Fleetmaster Vaylock, heavily guarded by 2 Marines but no longer bound in chains. The alien watched the screens with a profound sense of looming dread. Deep space telemetry arrays, positioned near Pluto, are suddenly registering massive gravitational shear, Major Bradley reported loudly, his voice tight but completely professional. It is them, Commander. Spacetime is rapidly warping across a localized front over 3 million miles wide. They are not merely dropping out of warp like normal vessels. They are forcefully tearing a colossal hole directly into our real space. Cross did not flinch at the terrifying news. Show me the visual feed, Cross ordered calmly. The massive main view screen immediately shifted from a sterile digital rendering to a direct optical feed transmitted from the outer system reconnaissance drones. The dark canvas of space itself seemed to literally bleed, rippling with bruised, unnatural colors of deep purple and sickly black before violently shattering like fragile glass. Out of the cosmic wound poured the terrifying Xyluxian swarm, an endless nightmare. Vaylock openly gasped, stumbling backward heavily against the cold metal bulkhead. The high-definition optical feed revealed an absolute nightmare. It was not a conventional military fleet. It was a hungry infestation. Millions upon millions of biomechanical leviathans, twisting and writhing like blind deep-sea predators, their organic hulls pulsing rhythmically with bioluminescent veins of toxic green fluid. They entirely dwarfed the largest human dreadnoughts, their jagged, crushing maws specifically designed to clamp onto planetary crusts and forcefully crack them open to harvest the molten cores within. The sheer, incomprehensible mass of the invading swarm immediately began to noticeably distort the gravitational orbit of the distant ice giant Neptune. They moved with a terrifying synchronization, an endless wave of consuming death that had successfully devoured thousands of civilized worlds without mercy or hesitation. Palantir Tactical Artificial Intelligence Network is currently estimating enemy numbers at roughly 4 million distinct vessels, Dr. Reed stated, her flying fingers dancing rapidly across her glowing datapad. Commander, they are broadcasting a wide-frequency jamming signal. It is highly aggressive. It is actively attempting to infiltrate our central network firewalls. Cross smirked slightly. Let them violently hit the firewall, Cross replied calmly. They are entirely used to effortlessly breaking primitive alien code. They have never encountered a decentralized, polymorphic, aggressively hostile human digital framework. Let our cyber warfare divisions instantly unleash the Cerberus virus directly into their central broadcast frequency. In the silent digital realm, an invisible, apocalyptic war instantly erupted. The biomechanical hive mind of the overwhelming swarm blindly attempted to crush the human networks, only to find itself hopelessly ensnared. The invasive alien mind was suddenly trapped inside an endlessly shifting labyrinth of predatory, malicious human code. The Cerberus virus did not merely block their aggressive digital incursions, it actively hunted their vulnerable subroutines. It seamlessly turned the swarm internal communication pathways violently against them, causing thousands of their smaller, agile fighter drones to suddenly twitch uncontrollably and violently crash into one another within the cold, dark expanse of outer space. Silent explosions blossomed across the enemy lines. Enemy Vanguard is aggressively pushing past the orbit of Jupiter, Major Bradley suddenly announced, his eyes locked onto the shifting tactical display. They are relentlessly accelerating directly toward the vulnerable inner system. They are completely ignoring all of our automated orbital warning broadcasts. Cross nodded slowly, his expression hardening. Of course they are ignoring us, Cross said. They foolishly think we are merely prey. It is finally time to properly educate them on their grave mistake. Major, immediately signal the entire fleet. Initiate Operation Mjolnir. Let us loudly show them exactly what unhinged human engineering can truly accomplish with a stolen warp drive. The massive human fleet did not foolishly move forward to engage in a traditional, honorable broadside battle. Humanity intimately knew that fighting a prolonged war of attrition against 4 million alien ships was mathematical suicide. Instead, they cleverly weaponized the very fundamental laws of physics. From the hidden dark side of Mars, exactly 300 unmanned, heavily armored stealth drone ships launched rapidly outward at truly incredible speeds. They were not carrying conventional explosives, kinetic tungsten rods, or devastating nuclear warheads. They carried heavily modified, intentionally unstable experimental warp cores. The stealth drones are completely in position within the exact center of the advancing swarm primary formation, Dr. Reed quickly confirmed, watching her screens intently. Our zero-point reactors are currently feeding critical mass directly into the unstable warp bubbles. Cross stared at the screen. Detonate, Cross commanded coldly. The stealth drone ships did not spectacularly explode in a massive flash of traditional fire. Instead, they simply vanished, instantly collapsing their respective active warp bubbles. The sudden, incredibly violent collapse of local space-time successfully created numerous localized gravitational singularities, terrifying micro-black holes that existed for only a tiny fraction of a fleeting millisecond. But a tiny fraction of a single millisecond was all it ever took. The unimaginable gravitational shear brutally ripped directly through the dense center of the massive swarm primary formation, like a sharpened scythe cutting through dry winter wheat. Hundreds of thousands of the massive biomechanical leviathans were instantly caught in the terrifying spatial implosions. Their hyperdense armor was effortlessly stretched into infinitely thin strings of torn atomic matter, before being completely crushed into absolute nothingness. The silent vacuum of outer space was brightly illuminated by the violent, blinding blue flashes of dying singularities, leaving massive, completely empty voids within the once impenetrable wall of the alien armada. Direct hits confirmed systematically. Across all targeted sectors, Bradley cheered enthusiastically. The main swarm's central formation is totally broken. Their collective synchronization has completely dropped by 70% due to the virus. Move the Terran Armada into close intercept range, Cross ordered, his cold eyes locked onto the burning, scattered remnants of the massive alien fleet. Fire our heavy phase particle cannons at will. Do not let a single one of those vile parasites retreat safely into warp space. We finish this brutal war right here. We finish this right now. The Archangel surged bravely forward, leading the glorious charge against the broken enemy. The galaxy would no longer belong to ancient, crumbling empires or mindless, consuming swarms. It now belonged entirely to humanity. Veloc slowly dropped to one trembling knee, completely defeated. The stars were finally safe, guarded by the apex predators. Did you enjoy this journey into the dark forest of the cosmos? If this story of humanity proving it is the undisputed apex predator of the galaxy kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow science fiction fans and subscribe to the channel for more epic daily HFY stories. Drop a comment below on what alien species you want to see humanity defeat next. Stay stellar, Commanders.
Hi, my name is Trantrong, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, aliens made first contact, then realized humanity was the galaxy's supreme force. HFY Sci-Fi S. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stood out to me most was the mix of tension, resilience, and quiet confidence. The aliens arrived expecting an easy victory, only to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't raw power. It was adaptability, creativity, and the ability to unite when it mattered most. It's a reminder that people are often capable of much more than others assume, and sometimes more than they assume about themselves. I'm curious, which moment changed the story for you? The reveal of humanity's hidden defenses, the surrender of the alien fleet, or the arrival of the larger threat beyond the stars? And if you were in Commander Cross's position, would you have focused on defense first, or explored the galaxy after securing Earth? Maybe there's a small lesson here for everyday life. Don't underestimate what can be built through patience, preparation, and teamwork. If this story gave you something to think about, or sparked your imagination for a few minutes, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you'd like more HFY adventures like this, consider liking the video or subscribing, but only if the journey was worth your time.